And it is a very moving experience to go there and to see what this meant, right on the border of the Soviet Union. Another very moving Oblate-run shrine in Sri Lanka, in a place called Mani. And you're aware that there's been a terrible war in Sri Lanka that has raged now for over 30 years. It ended last year with the crushing of the Tamil Tigers up in the north. In that area, the Tamil area, you have this sanctuary, the Shrine of Mani. And it was the place in the whole island where Sinhalese people and Tamil people could come together to worship, to be given a new outlook to this conflict, to be able to understand and see through so much of the propaganda that was being thrown at them by both sides. And that shrine was bombed a number of times. And this little statue of Our Lady, she's very small, she had to be hidden on a number of occasions during the conflict. But it was the only place in Sri Lanka where people could come from both sides of the war and find unity, find meaning in life. A magnificent place. One of the shrines in France. I just want to touch on one more there, which is Lourdes, which you've all heard of. Perhaps it's the most famous Marian shrine in the world. We didn't start it. I'd love to be able to say we started. But we have 10 oblates in ministry there. We do the language work. We've got the chaplains of the Germans, of the Italians, of the Sri Lankan, the Tamil-speaking people, etc. But we've also got something which is very beautiful, which you see at the bottom on the left there. We run the youth service in Lourdes. So we've got 3 oblates working full-time, doing all the youth ministry. And they have thousands of youth who come along every year. So that's what you're doing here too. I'm showing you this to show you we're part of the Oblate family, that we all seem to be doing the same thing with the same style. Cotabato in the Philippines, in South Africa, the Good Shepherd Retreat Center, in Vietnam, the very first ministry, now that we've started in Vietnam, the very first ministry we are doing is a retreat house, because that is the need in that communist country. And here we have a retreat center, pilgrimage center in Peru, just outside of Lima in a place called Comas. And it's called the Archbishop Romero Center. But if you look at that flower over there, if you can see it clearly at all, it talks about some of the activities that they do there. I can't even see it here. There we are. They have training and formation activities on economy, on health, on education, on ecology, on politics, on ethics. Okay? This is a retreat center, it's a shrine, it's a place of pilgrimage, but it is a place of pilgrimage that has a very, very specific outreach. And here I'd like to ask a question: who are the poor? You hear this thing, the missionary oblates are the missionaries to the poor. What does that mean? We're not Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa, Dorothy Day, and many others have a specific charism, a specific outreach to a specific type of poor person with a specific ministry. Our poor are the people that Eugene called the most abandoned. We always use this concept, the most abandoned. Who are the most abandoned? Then we saw it in what I was saying about Eugene's ministry. He didn't want to be a priest to run the church. The church would be quite well run by others. He said, who in X are the people who are abandoned by the church? It was the youth, it was the prisoners, it was the people who couldn't speak French, it was the people living in the villages. And so, who are the most abandoned for us today? And I put a number of categories up there. All those persons in the structures of the church do not reach. We've spoken about it. All those who do not know that God loves and moves them personally and have no one to tell them. They are abandoned. those whose situation cries out for the hope and light that only Jesus Christ can give them. So we're not just talking about materially poor people. We're talking about all people who are abandoned in some way or other because they cry out for some sort of meaning, some sort of light. And as our Oblate constitutions and rules say, these are the poor with their many faces, and we give them our preference. And so a question that I'd like to pose: do you as an Oblate partner reach out to the most abandoned through your work and ministry here? You may have the job of licking envelopes. Some people still lick envelopes in the United States, or licking stamps. And you think, what's that got to do with mission? But every stamp that you lick, I know you don't lick stamps, but every stamp that you put onto the envelope, every envelope that you seal, every production that you make for media, every person that you welcome to the shrine, every single one of those contacts has to be a contact where we are reaching out to people who are abandoned. And that's the question that I'm posing to you this morning. Do you, in your work, do you find yourself reaching out consciously to the most abandoned? I mean, all of you are here because the Oblate thrust, the thrust of what you are doing is towards the most abandoned. But are you personally aware of that? And another question that I'd like to pose there, that I start from Gandhi. Gandhi, who says, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. And I've got two pictures that are very meaningful to me, obviously. Nelson Mandela, who 20 years ago, exactly in February, the 11th of February, was released from prison. A day that we in South Africa worked for but never dreamt was going to be possible. And it happened 20 years ago. And the other person standing there talking at the microphone on the opposite side of Mandela is an Oblate of Mary Immaculate, Dennis Hurley, who was for many years the Bishop of Durban. And he was a fighter against apartheid, a fighter against injustice, a man who courageously, all his life, at great cost to himself and great danger to himself, spoke about this change that had to happen in South Africa. And it was quite moving. Once Nelson Mandela had been released from prison, one of his first stops after he'd been to Johannesburg, which is the big city, when he went down to Natal, called on Archbishop Dennis Hurley to thank him for what he had done. And Dennis Hurley reminded us South Africans all the time that we must be the change we wish to see in the world. If we want others to have the meaning and the light that I'm talking about, we ourselves have to be doing it. People must come to the mission office, they must come to the shrine, they must come to the media, they must come to our retreat centers, they must come to all those areas where we are missioning. And they must be able to see in practice what we are doing. I'd like to take a little break for a few minutes, still sitting there, not running around anywhere. Just talk for a few minutes about that question. Do you as an Oblate partner reach out to the most abandoned through your work and ministry here? Just share on that in your day.